Hey, everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Hot Lift Eat podcast, brought to you by Hot Lift Eat Official. I'm Carter here with Luke. Once again, Luke, isn't it weird thinking like now we have an intro?
Yeah. It's crazy. We're moving up in the world. We're actually turning this into something, I guess.
Thinking about like doing them back in the day on Zoom and stuff, and just talking with our guest today, like all the different streaming platforms and all the nonsense we've gone through over the years. Man, there's iterations, there's layers now.
Too many. Yeah, we had a miscommunication with our guest. Actually, we appreciate his patience and working with us in our unprofessionalism.
That's right. Classic. Yeah. All right. So welcome to the podcast. We got Johnathan from RedBeard Outdoors, fellow podcast host and enthusiast. What's going on, man?
Not much. I really appreciate the invite, guys. You guys, we've kind of crossed paths quite a bit, our brands, and then with First Form, Mountain Archery Fest, a bunch of other brands that we all tend to work with. It's been cool to see you guys and what you guys have going on, and just keep crossing paths and encouraging people basically to live that happier, healthier lifestyle,
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of what we're all about, right? Trying to hold each other accountable and push forward in the space, being active in the outdoors and the physical fitness side, which obviously you're intimately involved with your relationship with First Form and everything you do over there. But yeah, I mean, let's roll it back a little bit. Kind of give us a little bit about your background, how and where you grew up, your relationship with with the outdoors. As you came into this, was this something that you discovered later in life, or have you been in the woods, in the tree stand, in the mountains since you were a kid?
Yeah. Well, first, I want to apologize if you guys hear any noises or kids screaming in the background. We generally, over the summer, I get to work from home. I'm blessed to be able to work from home on top of being able to do the podcast and everything. And I don't mind my kids making noise. So I just give people a disclaimer there at the beginning, because we usually have half the neighborhood over between my 9-year-old and my 7-year-old, and they're always doing stuff. Right now, they've got laser tag going on between the up and down stairs, and those little kits, man, I can't, like, it blows my mind, because you used to have to go to an arcade for laser tag. And I think for Christmas, we got him this set of it's like a 4-pack, comes with a chest, like almost more official than some of the stuff I remember going and having to pay money for. And it came with a set of 4 for like $60, and they've been absolutely loving that. So anyway, getting that out of the way, man, I'm from North Carolina originally, born and raised right outside of Fort Bragg. My whole family was military. My grandfather, I call him Papa, he retired as a lieutenant colonel and told me, he said, "You have too many brains to go in enlisted. So if you want to go in, get your butter bars. Otherwise, don't go into the military." I said, "Okay." So I went a different route than the military, but everyone in my families was in the military, and grew up in that lifestyle. All my scout masters grew up in Boy Scouts. All of them were special forces guys. So we had some pretty cool camping trips. At the time, as a kid, I didn't realize that's what they were. As I've grown up and built even more of an adult relationship with them, I realized I was surrounded by some pretty cool badasses in the woods. So all of that to be said, grew up in the outdoors, absolutely loved it. I wasn't really big into hunting growing up, because my family didn't do any archery hunting. And for me, nothing against Easterners, but I don't like sitting in a stand with a rifle having shooting lanes for deer. Like, that just, for me, if I want to go do target practice, I love guns, I'll go shoot guns, but that just felt a little off to me. And so I stuck with fishing, outdoors, scouts, got my Eagle Scout. And then I came out west, never been west of the Mississippi. And I just said, I'm going to go to BYU, which everyone out there that listens knows I'm Mormon, LDS, whatever you want to call it. And I was like, I want to go to that school, because I don't want to be a part of a party school before I go serve my 2-year mission wherever I end up going. And so flew out here, no family, no friends. And I was blown away that when I flew in June of that year, there was snow on the mountaintops. I was like, what is this? Like, what is this place? And so went to school for a year, went and served a 2-year mission down in Mexico City, and the surrounding areas. And even then, I preferred I wouldn't call it the jungle, but it was up in the mountains. I was in a town to end my mission the last 6 months, I think the town had like 4,000 people. And man, I mean, it was about an hour and a half from the coast, from the east coast of Mexico. It was gorgeous. Fresh food. There was animals everywhere. There was greenery everywhere, mountainous. I was just, oh, it was amazing. So I've always been drawn to the outdoors. And fitness just came through sports as well. Just football, baseball, soccer. Always been into that as well.
Awesome. Are you in Utah currently?
I fell in love with the mountains out here. So came back from my mission. The goal was to finish up my degree. My mom had moved out here by then and gotten remarried. So I did now have family out here. And as I was working on my degree, I got married to a woman that's from here. And I told her, though, like going into the marriage, I was like, about 5 years, we'll be moving back east. She was like, okay, cool. Adventure, never really had lived out east herself. And I just missed, you know, just the home state of North Carolina. And all the greenery too, which you don't have that here in Utah. I hadn't gotten into the mountains yet out here, and so seeing how dead the valley is, it's just dry. There's lots of buildings. It's a desert, and even looking up on the mountains, they're nothing like the Appalachian Mountains, where it just looks like God took a paintbrush and just painted over the landscape. So I missed all of that. Well, about 2 years into our marriage, maybe it was a year into our marriage, I met a guy. I was helping him move here in our neighborhood and or clean out some stuff or something. And I saw a bunch of dead, or not dead heads, but Euro mounts on in his garage. And I was like, huh. I said, do you hunt? And he was like, yeah, some of these are my dad's and some of these are mine. And I said, can I go with you this year? He's like, sure. So turns out he's a really good dude. He's now my best friend, whether he likes that or not. I don't know. I haven't really asked his permission, but he's my best friend, CPA, got me into hunting out here. And then a couple years into that, after I'd been successful on nothing major big, but I'd been successful in filling my buck tag every year that I had it. He said, I haven't really got to do an archery hunt in a while. My brother stopped shooting. Um, he said, you're into fitness. You are okay with failing. You learn from it. You don't throw your crap and lose your shit on the mountain when you mess up a stalk. He said we should get you in archery. I kind of pushed it off for a little bit. Just knowing myself, I go all in on things whenever I do pick something up, and I knew it could be expensive and time consuming, but I eventually did. And now, what's it been, 5 years later, I'm the guy they come to with questions because I'm the gear nerd and they have their own lives that they've got going on, and absolutely fell in love with everything out west. And my wife's like, so when are we moving back east? And I was like, we're kind of not now. So I'm stuck out. I'm in love with the public land.
Jonathan, what was your first kind of season, your first successful season like out there hunting Utah? That's a state I don't think Luke or I haven't. I don't think Luke's hunted either, but I've always wanted to, and you hear a lot of great things, especially about mule deer and elk and about Utah. But what was your first kind of successful hunt out there?
Yeah, so I actually went and did rifle my first. So the first year I didn't draw, so I just went with Brent. And I want to say that first year we came across a bull. It was a really odd, like looking back on it now, that bull should never have been there. He was alone. It was like early October. We were actually up there looking for deer, and I was like, man, that's a weird looking rock over there. And it was like 9 or 10 o'clock in the middle of the day. He was in the sun. Like it was just everything about it was off. Like thinking about how elk normally act. And anyway, we ended up, that was my first encounter with an elk. He ended up tagging out with that elk. I helped him pack it out, and I was hooked at that point. The next year I drew a tag in the same area, it just happens to be, I mean, I can drive 10 minutes to the trailhead and I'm in my unit. Right. And again, nothing trophy crazy potential. But it's a good unit, and there's definitely animals to chase. So that's what I'm after. And, I had the early rifle tag, which was the first week of October, and I just went up with whatever gear I had. And there was one day I think Brent could go with me, but other than that, I was just like, I'm going to come up here. I had enough service that I could text. I didn't have a Garmin or anything like that at the time. Stayed in touch with my wife and ended up tagging out on a buck. I want to say it was either 2 or 3 point. I can't remember. I just remember that I got a buck and I was super excited. And so, I didn't really have like, that was my first experience shooting at an animal. And I didn't get overwhelmed with buck fever until after I fired the shot. And it was kind of odd. I was walking this trail and it was like the second to last day of the hunt. I'd blown a couple stalks at that point, still trying to figure out everything about hunting and the wind and everything. And I came up over this ridge and I was just about to sit down and have some snacks because the day was almost over. So I was going to find a place to pitch my tent or head back home, one of the two. And I just looked and I'm like, oh, there's a buck right there. It was about 150 yards from me. And so I just kind of set my rifle up in my hand, rested on my knee, and dropped him in one shot. And then I called Brent and I was like, so I killed him. What do I do now? I hadn't really thought that through. I knew to get the guts out, but then I was like, so what, like, what exactly do I do at this point? And luckily I had some people that were able to make it up there. And I was playing loud. Like I was worried about bears and cougars, just not knowing again much about it. And I was playing some loud AC/DC, beautiful moonlight, clear sky. I was on the open face of this little ridge. And I just got to work it. I think it took me probably 2 hours just to gut him. Like I just didn't know what to do. and then they got up there and they helped me. We actually, again, looking back on it now, my brother-in-law came up and I appreciate his help, but he was like, you have a saw? And I was like, yeah, sure. He literally cut my buck in half. We just strapped him on our backs like that. Like, just sideways. Yeah, just right through the friggin' back strap. Like I didn't know anything. And I was just kind of like, I don't think that's how you do it, but okay, like whatever. We need to get off the mountain. It's getting late. And it was a great time. I'm glad we got pictures of that. It was a blast. Beautiful day. And then of course it's just kind of gone from there. So
That's awesome. Yeah, there's a lot of parallels there between your story and mine. Grew up East Coast, Appalachia. Dad was in the Army, and then I ended up going in and kind of spent most of my time in the Southeast, though. But came out, I got stationed at Fort Carson, fell in love with the West, and same deal. Got out of the Army, just got out of the Army, and Caroline's like, my wife, when are we moving back east? I was like, I don't think we are. I think we're staying out here. So, yeah, it's one of those things, man. And hunting, bow hunting, all of it, just it's a drug. A very exciting. Crack is cheaper, honestly.
It probably would be. Yeah. I wouldn't doubt it.
So what took you to get kind of more involved within the industry with, your podcast, what you're doing on YouTube? What was that transition like from going from, okay, you discovered this passion, you're fired up about it, and now you want to get more involved?
So I realized real quick how expensive it can get to be involved in archery, to be involved in rifle, to be involved in hunting. And if you want the good gear, it can get pretty pricey. And I always kind of had an idea of I wanted to do something with YouTube or social media. But so I carried my stepdad's camera around for a weekend hunt that I had. And I didn't like it. I was like, I can't sell film. Like the idea of, I have so much respect for the guys that go out there and self-film their hunts, because not only are you dealing with all the variables of getting in on an animal, you're also trying to get the shot. And the people that can do it, like if it's 10% of people kill an elk with a bow, I mean, I'd say 1% of that 10% can successfully, self-film and get the shot and kill the ant, like all of that. It's just crazy. So I said, don't, screw it. I can't do that. I'm not going to ruin my experiences and my kids' future experiences by being more concerned about the camera. And I just don't have time to get good at that. Again, my respects to people that do. And so I said, well, I like having good conversations. I'd been on my own fitness journey at that point, and was starting to learn about tax write-offs. And so I was like, I need to start a brand, and so my thing was getting involved with having good conversations with people, because you can't just, like a John Dudley, you can't just say, hey John, can I get you on the phone for an hour? And like, an hour of his time is worth more than just a conversation. Now, I'm sure people like that would be more than willing to if they had the time, but their whole job is to, push they're worth more than just getting on the phone. They may not say that. I'll say that for them. And so I said, well, if I start a podcast, I can do that. I've got a platform that I can bring these people on. I can learn from them selfishly, but also I can share with other people what I'm learning, and my questions and my way of having a conversation is going to be different than your guys's or anyone else out there. And so that's what I did. I told myself I'm going to do X amount of podcasts solo. Man, that was so awkward. And then once I had hit that mark, again, just telling myself, like, I'd proven to myself that I can do this and I'm consistent. I'm not just starting off, swinging for the fences and trying to get people on, but I can provide value, and I have a platform, and I'm not just going away. And so once I did that, then I started inviting some friends on. Then I started inviting some bigger names, and now it's just grown to where I think today's podcast that came out was episode 352. And so I do everything between gear and then having conversations with people. And then every other Thursday I do a Why First Form Outdoors episode. So yeah, it's just evolved from there, and slowly upgraded my equipment. Now I have an actual camera. And just things like that over the last 3 years. It's just slowly grown and progressed, and it'll just keep getting better.
We were mentioning at the beginning kind of how we've grown and changed platforms and all sorts of stuff, and cameras have gotten upgraded, and microphones, and all sorts of stuff. When you start from, you have no idea, right? Luke at the beginning was like, should we start a podcast? Are we going to do this? Put it out on Instagram, and was like, if 10 people say we should have one, we're going to start one. Don't know how to do it, but we'll figure it out. Can you talk a little bit about your journey from the very beginning to like how that has progressed to like where you are now?
Yeah, no, of course. So from the very beginning, again, it was very awkward. I love talking to people. I could hold a conversation for hours. Like, that charges me and my social battery and who I am. I love having those conversations. And more than anything, I feel like you can learn from everybody. Something. You can pull something from every conversation you have. Some people that depletes their battery. For me, that I could sit and talk to people for hours. And so at the beginning, talking to a microphone, and I didn't record video either. So I didn't even have anything I was really looking at. I was just talking. That was so awkward. And the first couple episodes, my buddy, and these are the kind of friends you guys need to have in your life, by the way, people out there listening, people that will not beat you down in a negative way, but they tell you the truth. And he was like, dude, after like the second or third, he was like, you either need to quit or you need to get some coaching or something. He was like, because you are not you when you're on the podcast. He was like, I love hanging out with you. You bring this energy. You can talk to anybody. He said, but on the podcast, you sound so monotone. You don't sound like yourself. And so, okay. So, I don't remember where I heard it. I wish I could give them credit because I've mentioned this on other podcasts before too. But the idea of, again, I wasn't recording anything in video, so I could close my eyes at the time and visualize the people that I wanted to talk to when I was doing those solo episodes. And I didn't tell anyone I was doing that. I just tried it. I put the episode out, and my buddy, within a day or two, texted me. He was like, what did you do different? So I just thought about who I was talking to. And he said, well, you keep doing that because I worked. That sounds like you. That is who you are. So I don't recommend people go back and listen to like the first 10 episodes. Please don't. If you do, cool. I leave them up there. You can see how awkward it was. But it's gone from that to then figuring out that I could use my iPhone, which I was doing all my photography and anything like that on my iPhone, using that as a webcam with my MacBook. So I was doing that. And then, eventually finally getting a nicer microphone, getting some wireless microphones, and then getting an actual camera. So it's kind of progressed over the last 3 years. Again, reaching out, I'm blown away by how many people say yes to being on a podcast as well. Big names, small names. If you can get through the red tape of getting through their spam folder or their whatever it's called on Instagram, where they filter out unknown people, if you can get through that and find a connection to, like, I've had very few people say no. And most of the time they say no, it's because it's their busy season for whatever industry they're in. And they literally do not have time to sit down. I could probably count on one hand how many times I've been told no by people I expected would say no. And it's not me. It's just these people are willing to give that information and provide it because they want to get their voices out. They obviously want brand recognition as well, but they genuinely want to share. Most people want to sit down and share the knowledge that they've learned through experience with as many people as possible. And podcasts are a great way to do that.
Yeah, 100%. It was kind of crazy. Like, we started reaching out to folks when we first started, and I was shocked at, the level of person that would say yes to this podcast. That, I mean, we probably had like 25 listeners at the time. But yeah, I mean, they're willing to jump in, and especially once you show that consistency. And that was something, you said you're on episode 300 and whatever. I think we're 200 and something. And I was listening to, I think it was Alex Hermosa talking about it, but it's like, if you want to get into the top 1% of podcasts, you have to get past episode 21. Like, it is crazy. It is so, nobody sticks with it. There's been millions and millions, and most folks will start it and then it just falls off. And we've even, seen that within our own network to a degree of trying to get the right personnel, because it's hard to do something where you're just consistently doing it day in and day out, and the editing and the back end. And like, now we have a team, but it used to be me sitting there like in the mornings or in the evenings, like trying to get it edited and posted, and then you miss a day and then you're like, oh no. But it's like, just keep doing it. Whatever you're doing, whatever you're trying to do, like, have that extended time horizon. And people see that, right? If they go in there and they see, oh, episode 300, yeah, no problem. This guy's been doing it. If they see episode 11, they might not say yes because they want to see if you're going to stick with it. And that was something I was talking to the host of the Nomad Strength podcast, and he had the same. He reached out to Jack Carr, and he was like, "Let's see if you make it past, episode 30, and then I'll come on." And like, that was exactly it. So no, I love that, man.
Yeah, exactly. And for anyone out there listening to, like, look back on your life and some of the best relationships that you've had, whether you have built a relationship with a business, you've got a partner maybe in your own journey that you've got going on. It's all about value exchange. And I'm very intertwined with First Form and helped get First Form Outdoors off the ground as well, outside of headquarters. And the owner of that, Andy Frisella, discusses that like so many times in his podcast, the MFCEO project, and of course now the Really F project, or Really F podcast. He talks about value exchange, and then something else I heard the other day too is, don't be an asshole, right? Asking questions. Don't be an asshole, right? Because if you are willing to go to people, you need to show them what you can provide them as well. You need to not just go out with your palms open and, hey, what can you give me? It's, what can I provide you? And in exchange, I feel like that is worth this. And so with a lot of, whether you're looking to partner with businesses, maybe you're looking to start your own brand, it's, what value do you provide your audience for them to keep coming back? That's the value exchange. Their value to you is their time and attention. Your value to them is the information you're providing, the guests you're bringing on, the gear reviews you're doing, whatever it is that you're doing. Your brand needs to provide to them, as well as not just, I need a like, I need a subscribe, I need a review. You've got to be able to provide back as well, if not more than what you're asking for.
100%, man. That I don't even remember where I heard it, but it was with relationships in general, right? If you have, your wife, for instance, like, you look at it not transactionally, but if you just overall look at deposits and withdrawals, just like a bank account. And if you're just constantly withdrawing, it's the same thing with an audience. If all you're doing is asking for stuff, marketing, it's the same deal. If all you're doing is being like, buy this, do this, like, you're just going to run that account dry, versus if you're just trying to focus on the value you provide, way more, if not just totally just focus on that, the other stuff will follow. And that's been a big lesson that I've learned over the past, several years. Because, man, you probably get it too, but like the number of DMs that I get that's like, hey, you send me a t-shirt, I'll rep your company in the gym. And I'm like, all right, buddy. Like,
Yeah. Like, so I'm not
that's not,
worth $20 to you,
yeah.
you know? It's like,
It's
or
like all,
$30, whatever. Yeah.
yeah. And then are you worth that,
Mhm.
$30 t-shirt? Like,
Mhm.
because you've got your friends and family that follow you and you're going to have some shitty iPhone photo. And it's like,
Yeah.
and I get it, right? I understand they're trying to like figure out how to do this. And I was in that
Mhm.
position before I started HLE where I was a brand rep for a bunch of companies. But it's like, just focus on what you provide. And then the backside of that it'll come. If all you want to
Mhm.
do is just give, and then to be able to sustain that, you have to be coming from a genuine, authentic place of wanting to provide value, to wanting to teach, to wanting to mentor, to wanting to share your story and your message, because everybody has one, right? We've all gone through hardship. We all have something to provide there, and whatever that is, if you tell that and and you're engaging and you're not a robot, or we used to just get drunk because we were so nervous to get on the podcast, which I kind of regret some of those episodes, honestly. But it's part of our story. It's part of our journey, right? That's
Mhm.
why I leave
Yep.
them up there. And it's like, we've evolved since then. But if you're willing to do that and focus on the value that you can give versus the value that you receive, you're going to get to where you want to go and extend that time horizon. This isn't going to happen overnight, whatever you're building. Like it takes consistency. It takes hard work. You've got
Mhm.
to know your purpose. You got to know your direction, your azimuth, and you got to look at this as a 5, 10, 15, 20-year play. I mean, Andy didn't build what First Form is in 5 minutes, right? He lived in the
Mm-mm.
back of the shop for years. He made no money for a
Mhm.
decade. He talks about that all the time, right? Like, can you do something for a decade? Because if you do something for a decade, it would be unreasonable to expect that you won't become good at it. And then if you become
Yep.
good at something, people will pay for that value, whether it's with product, if you're trying to do the brand representation thing, if it's with money, if you're building a brand or a business, do it for 10 years, figure that out, and then start, expecting something, I guess.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And that's just it's a big deal, and you should feel awkward asking for things, and I have to get over that myself as well sometimes. I still feel awkward sometimes, but it becomes like when you're reaching out to companies or you're negotiating with companies, if you are looking for partnership, uh it's I can provide this and being confident that you can do that, not just asking for things. Again, going back to your idea with, a spouse. I've been married 10 years at this point, which is crazy to think. So I did that thing for a decade at this point. And it's not easy. My wife has had to put up with a bunch of crap from me, and let alone my kids, right? But she stuck with it for 10 years, and I really appreciate that. But also, there's times where I hear people talk about I have to ask my wife permission to go hunting. I joke about that sometimes. My wife hates it because she's like, "You don't ask me for permission." She said, "I just expect communication. That's it." You know, and if you're open and you communicate, like, "Hey, this is what I do." Also, if you're looking to start something new and your wife, like you failed 5 or 6 times before at something new that you were going to do, don't expect your wife to be 100% on board. It's just you failed the last 6 times. Why should she expect anything different at this point? She's human too. And if you're bringing her in the family into your failures, you need to understand that you got to get a little bit over your pride, realize you have failed X amount of times, and show her that this time is different. And once they have that, like the proof in the pudding, they will be on board, and I think anyone that has started a brand or a company or anything like that and has a spouse can relate to that. Most spouses aren't just going to be like, "Oh yeah, babe, go for it. 100%. I'm all in. Take all of our paychecks and everything and go for it." Like that's just not going to happen unless you have some I don't think that's ever happened in the history of mankind, but
Yeah, my
yeah.
wife and I fought about when I started the company, I bought, I think, 2 dozen blank hats in an
Mhm.
embroidery sewing machine to make the first patches that and taught myself how to sew. And we went back and forth on whether, that $400, if we were throwing that down the drain or not.
Mhm.
Right. And it was like, or like back to real estate investing, right? I've got a couple rental properties. Women typically are a lot more conservative. Obviously, there's outliers. There's, female entrepreneurs, but that space is typically dominated by men because we're more aggressive. We are risk takers. Like that's in our DNA. That's why, we're the soldiers, we're the hunters. That's kind of the roles that across the bell curve are kind of consistent. And I had the same conversation with some guys because they were living here in Colorado, moving here. I moved here right during COVID, and the housing market was crazy, and everybody's freaking out about it. And I'm just telling folks, I'm like, look, like within the army and some of the guys that I was mentoring, it's like you should probably consider buying a house right now. Like interest rates are at record lows, this or that, and the excuse is always, oh, my wife doesn't want to. My wife doesn't want to, and then it's put off on there. And like my response back to that, I was like, my wife didn't want to do anything like that. Like, if she had her druthers, like our money would be sitting in a bank account, very safe, going nowhere. Like, but it's safe, right? Because she wants the nest, the security. But it's my job to be able to articulate to my wife that I actually know what I'm doing because I've done the research. I've proved the small wins. I've built a track record with her. So it's like, I have done the due diligence and the legwork on the front end to then be able to explain and teach and educate her as to why this matters. Like I remember on a whiteboard, like drawing the opportunity cost of not investing our money and like what inflation does, the wrong direction it goes, or if we buy a bigger house or if we buy a nicer vehicle. Like we lived in shitholes. I was a company commander in the Army as a captain, and we lived in like the worst base housing. It was essentially the hood in Columbus that the post had annexed. Like it wasn't even actual base housing. It was a weird situation. But it was like $400 a month. But I'm like, if we can just do this, we can make the sacrifice and build long term. And I didn't come to that, right? I learned that I had to be able to teach her. So then when we had the conversation about this business, I had a track record of wins where it's like, we have built our net worth. It's increased. Like we've made smart investments. Yeah. Are there going to be mistakes? 100%. But that was something before we even got married that I talked to her about. I was like, this is who I am. Am I going to make a mistake that cost us $100,000? Probably at some point, but the wins are going to outweigh the losses. And if we can just move forward, and that's still, I just got out of the Army, don't have that government paycheck coming in anymore. We had a conversation this morning about that. And it's like, do you trust me? Like, have I done this before? Have I shown it? And it's a constant back and forth. So I love that you said that, because I don't hear that talked about a lot, especially on the spouse side of the house. It's like, we have to do what we need to do as men with building our skill sets, our knowledge base, and those little wins to be able to give them the comfort to know and the trust that it's not just automatic, right?
Yep. And that's the funny thing too, is my wife, she'll tell you, it's one of the most frustrating but cool things at the same time, is my wife will tell you, she knows that I don't want to do something because I haven't done it yet. She's like, what about this house project? I'm like, I want to get to it, but she's like, yeah, but it's not on your priority list. Yeah, you're right. Like, what about that money talk, babe? I'm like, yeah, I want to.
It's on the list.
She's like, and she'll joke sometimes because I might have a busy week or whatever. And she'll come up to me and she's like, did I make the list today? I'm like, shit, you're right. I'm sorry. But we have that relationship where I don't blow up on her when she calls me out on my bull crap. That takes time, guys. Like, that's the other thing. It's so frustrating because I know where I want to be, but a lot of those things take time. Same thing with relationships. Being able to, I've changed a lot. Like the Johnathan that she married is not the Johnathan today. She laughs about that because she's like, man, if I had known that you would want to wear cargo shorts and freaking Crocs all the time, and camo, like I wouldn't have married you. I'm like, well, I'm glad I tricked you then. Cause, but that, the evolution, like there's things that have changed, but also there's, your wife changes, your spouse changes as well. And being able to grow together over that time is a big deal instead of growing apart. And I don't want to be that guy that's 50 and I'm like, yeah, I got to ask my wife. Like, no, like you already know what your wife's going to say. You know why she's going to say it. You don't need to talk to her. You've been married X amount of years. You know what the conversation is going to look like. And the thing is, have you proven to her why you can be trusted? Have you been consistent? I'm not good at a lot of stuff. A lot of my stuff isn't the highest quality, highest production out there, but I'm freaking consistent. My podcast will be out on Tuesdays and Saturdays, period. bar none. Doesn't matter if I'm hunting, doesn't matter if I'm wherever, I will have planned it out ahead of time. And so like, that's how I've made sure, again, I don't have like gritty quality videos or some of these guys that put out some amazing hunting videos. I don't have that, but I am freaking consistent. And that is one thing that I do have that I know I'm good at just about anything that I do in life.
That consistency and like you said, like I know you said it in jest, but like, did I make the list today? That's so important too, right? When we're talking about these big ideas and chasing dreams and finding purpose and that kind of stuff, man, it can be incredibly difficult to balance that relationship while pursuing these goals, right? And also, right, you have kids, maintaining a meaningful relationship with your kids and making sure you're spending intentional time with them, right? And you know, you're a man of faith as well, and making sure you're carving out enough time to make sure you're taking that seriously as enough as it deserves, right? And that can, you know, you got a lot of balls in the air when you're chasing some of those goals.
Exactly. Yeah, it's there's never really a balance, and if you're at balance, you're at a net zero. Like there's things that are going to get more attention in different seasons of life or even different seasons of the year. You know, I want to be hunting more than I am. But if I'd gone on a bear hunt, a turkey hunt, and the fishing trips I wanted to do, like my family would have gotten zero time with me. And my work probably would have suffered too, because, you know, I do have what I call a 9 to 5. You know, I've got a normal job that pays the bills, takes care of the family. And then I do this on the side. This is fun, right? It's something that I enjoy doing. Eventually I want to do it full time. But right now, again, even 3 years in, it's not anywhere near what I'm making in my normal job. And so, you know, my goal is 5 years from now, maybe being able to back off a little bit, and then 10 years from now, being able to go maybe full time into this or something like that. But some people can't even fathom the idea of doing this for 3 years, you know? And I kind of smile now because people ask me how long I've been doing it. And I'm like, man, it's 3 years. It's actually 3 years this month. And it's crazy to think everything that's happened in the last 3 years, but also I love looking at everyone that I've surrounded myself with and that have also let me into their circle and how they've grown over the last 3 years as well. And just things like, for example, First Form, you know, First Form Outdoors was thought about for a while. I know Jake wasn't the only person that thought about it, but he's the one that kind of put the steam behind it. And he's got a funny story. So I don't know if you guys have had him on, but you should definitely get Jake on to talk about how he, you know, got First Form Outdoors started. But basically he started he started the Instagram, and when he knew that it wasn't a bad thing was when Andy followed it and he wasn't fired. So and I found it, you know, I think they had like 200 followers, and I was all in because the community behind First Form has continued to grow. It's just great people. It's not just about shoving supplements down people's throats. It's building the community. Where are you at? What are your goals? And how can we help you get there? And if supplements are involved, awesome. And if not, we still want you to be part of the community. That's really what we are all about over there. And so that's a big one that has grown over the last 3.5 years that I've been involved in it, seeing that come to fruition to where now we have a camo where you can see the P is inside the camo, and a whole bunch of other stuff that we've got. We've put on bass fishing tournaments down in South Carolina. By the time this comes out, we will have announced the winner of the hunt of a lifetime in Montana, antelope hunt on a reservation, over $9,000 package. Like all of this stuff that we are doing now that 3 years ago may have been on the vision board, possibly. And now we're here. So it's cool to see that kind of growth. And I'm sure you guys have experienced the same thing with your podcast.
Oh yeah. I mean, just across the board, I'm really aggressive, right? I got big ideas, as Carter can attest to. But when you take that moment to sit back and look at like where we were as a company a year ago, 3 months ago, 2 years ago, 5 years ago, like 5 years ago, I was making the patches myself and sewing them on hats, you know, like now we're got distribution and manufacturing and all that stuff. So it's pretty wild to see. And then, that pales in comparison where we're going to be 12 months from now with what we're doing. And I think it's important to take us, especially if you have my personality, which is all I focus on is the next thing, which is good because it's driven us to the point that we're at with our growth. But at the same time, it's like, appreciate it. Like, look at the journey. And, one of my big realizations, we do a mindset call as part of our team, our community, and I do it at the end of every month on Sundays. And this last one, I really just kind of took it for everything that I've just really learned recently, because transition out of the Army, like my last 3 months has been wild. And as I look at it, it's like I'm falling in love with the process, not the goal, which is not something that I used to be so goal focused. And so and then there's no fulfillment there, because I get to that next one. It's like, where's the next one? What's the next one? What's the next one? I got to keep checking all these boxes. And also it clouds my judgment, my decision making, because I get so singularly focused on this one thing versus like, what are the steps that I need to take to get to the point that I want to get to, and let me focus on that. And then I shift who I am as a man, as a CEO, as a leader within this company, within our community. And then then I can identify those deficiencies. Like, I'm a ADHD all over the place. Like, I'm not, very deliberate with a lot of my task organization. So it's like, I'm going to bring in a guy who's going to keep me on track. And Charlie, he's awesome. Sends me a daily text, these things, right? Let me fill these gaps with the right people, or I need to broaden my skill set and pour into that. And I think that that's so important. And that mindset shift to focus on the process and the steps versus the end state has really been an unlock for me and what we're doing.
Yep. No, I love it. I absolutely love that. And another big thing for me is, again, going back to kind of where I started, knowing how expensive this hobby and lifestyle can be. Something that I really, once I got to the point where I had partners, and I do now, I wanted to give back. And part of my negotiation with, forming a partnership with certain companies, one, I have to have either used the gear or trust the gear. But two, because I don't agree with, and if people handle it this way, that's cool. I'm not judging you. But for me personally, I don't like talking about things that I don't genuinely use or trust. And my buddy said it best over the weekend. I handed him my bow because we had the same draw length. I was like, hey, try this one, because he's looking at, getting a new bow. It's been a couple years. And he draws back, shoots this downhill shot. I think it was like 40 or 50 yards, pinwheels it. And I was like, look, that bow made you shoot better, just kind of joking. He's like, damn it, man, you are the best salesman I know. He's like, I look at the buddy over, and he's wearing the shoes that I had talked to him about like 2 months or like, but it's because I use it. They see me using it and I trust it. I'm not out there like doing some snake oil salesman, like, oh yeah, this is the best stuff. And in reality, I'm using something else. Right. And so going back to the giveaways that I do, it's not necessarily to grow where I'm like the followers or anything like that. It's genuinely to give back to the people that have supported and helped grow to that point to where I'm doing the giveaway. And I love that my partners are open to that. Obviously it gets them exposure. There's, you get brand exposure from it, but my main goal behind it is to give back to the people that maybe either can't afford that piece of gear, are grinding day in and day out, don't have time to go look up gear, and they have come to me looking for gear recommendations. And now I'm able to give something back to a lucky winner or two of those giveaways. I love doing that more than anything, because it just lights people's faces up. It makes them feel good. And I know anytime I've won something, it makes me feel good. I just want to be able to do that, for people that follow along the journey and have helped support up to this point as well.
Yeah, I think that piece is really important, and I agree 100%. I mean, that's really what we're all about with the companies that we bring in and partner with. It's like, it might be a product that I haven't used, but I need to know that I would stand behind it, see the product, talk about the product, and then more than just the product, it's like, let me get to know the folks behind the company, right? What are your ethos? Like, are we aligned, like, with our core values? Like, because if it's one of so we utilize the entrepreneur operating system from Gino Wickman for how we kind of build our framework. And the first thing you do as part of that is build your core values. And I think that's so important, because if not, you can have, I called it when I was in the military, ethical drift. And it's one of the reasons why I got out, because I think there's a lot of that going on right now in the military. because it's these little concessions, right? Nobody sets out. I think the majority of people are good people, right? Both in business, both in the military, both
Oh
in
yeah.
leadership, within the corporate world, right? Nobody sets out to be the bad guy, but you make little concessions because it's like the lesser of the two evils, or it's the greater good. Like, oh, I got to make this decision for the company because it's going to push us here. And like, yeah, it violates this a little bit, but like, it's not that bad. And it's like the white lie thing, right? Like, oh, white lie, white lie, white lie. When all of a sudden you look at it and you're like, fuck, I'm a liar. And it's the same thing in this space. And there's a lot of it that goes on. I think it's every industry. I don't want to call it the hunting industry specifically. There's a lot of misrepresentation. The more I've gotten plugged in, the more I've been exposed to it. And so you've got to have the definition of your core values, both as if you're going to start a brand, a company, a party, like whatever you're doing within business, but also in your personal life. Like, what are your core values? And as a man, I think you need to set that for your family and your ethos. So you have that framework. So you have that azimuth that's pushing you in that direction always. Because then when I get to a decision point and it's like, I don't know if this feels right. Well, then it's easy. Black and white on the paper, I have my core values. Does this violate any of them? The decision's made for me. If it doesn't, maybe it's a little bit still gray, then it's a conversation that we need to have with the right people that are surrounding me that can weigh in on that, right? Like you were saying with the hard conversations with your buddy who was telling you that you sucked on the first podcast. It's like, you've got to have those people. You can't have the person behind you that's just sitting there saying yes, 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 yes. Like, it's that check and that of who you are, because it's so easy to let ego get involved or let the profit get involved in the direction on those goals. And so, yeah, no, I mean, I agree with that 100%. And I think for anybody that's wanting to start their own thing, you've got to define that first, because if you don't know what defines you, as a man, as an entrepreneur, as a business owner, as a father, or as a spouse, if you're a wife or whatever, like, if you don't have that set in black and white, like, you're going to experience that. And those decision points become so much harder because you've got so much external pressure pushing you in certain directions.
Couldn't agree with you more.
Yeah. The other thing that you mentioned earlier, I'm backtracking a lot, and it's on balance. And you were talking about how, like, if you're balanced, you're at a net zero, like nothing's going forward. And it was funny because you literally, the exact words that I was going to talk about was seasons. I think it's important because I hear it all the time, and it's a buzzword within the military, especially, like, gotta have balance, work-life balance. It's like, there's no such thing. It's seasons. And like, and that going back full circle to the conversations with your spouse, that has to be a part of that. If you're trying to do anything, there's going to be days and weeks and months and years potentially where it's not balanced. But what's the end state of the goal, and where are you moving towards? I mean, when I was doing that, I was a company commander. I'd wake up at 4 a.m. to do orders. On my lunch break, I would run to UPS and USPS. I would try to spend a little time with my son. Then I would go do some more work till 10. Like, there was no balance there. Like, I was sleeping a couple hours a night and then knocking this shit out. But that was the season we could do until we could grow and expand the team and have somebody take over the fulfillment and all that. There's times where I look at Caroline and it's like, this next 2-3 weeks is going to be shit. I'm going to be gone a lot. I'm going to be working a lot. I'm traveling, like, whatever. But it's so I can get to the point to where I can 100% control my schedule. Because people have a misnomer of like, oh, if you work for yourself, you control your schedule. It's not entirely true at all. It's actually, there are no hours. Like, a 9 to 5 is easier, for being honest. You'll hunt more if you don't own your own business in the hunting industry. I promise you that. You might get better opportunities when you are hunting, but for the time in the field, it's going to be less. I promise that. And so, like, just understanding that, don't look at balance, look at seasonal balance, whether that's quarterly, monthly, annually, whatever. How do you're going to, that you're going to have, I might be negative in the account for the next couple months, but now I get to pour back into that account, or negative in the account, especially if you're trying to build something while you have another job, something's going to give always. And you just going to need to be deliberate about that, and then communicate with, your significant other in that regard.
Yeah. And with the hunting thing too, guys, think about why your spouse, if you do have a spouse that doesn't like hunting season, ask yourself why. How do you come back from your hunts? Whether you're successful or not, how do you come back? Are you worse? Or are you better? And that's the thing too, is like, even when I don't notch a tag, I usually take the drive home. I'll call my wife, and usually she's like, you sound tired or you sound a little down. I'm like, well, I am. Here's the situation, but I'm gonna process my learning of what I could do better on the way home. And then when I get home, like, I get to teach my kids why it's a little upset, but I don't take it out on them. Like you don't turn around and lash out at your kids or your wife because you sucked. Because let's just be honest, is really what happened. Like there's a little bit of luck maybe involved, but you blew a stalk or you whatever happened, or and you may feel like you wasted the last couple of days that you were out there, whatever. But learn from it, learn from the failure. Don't be okay with failure. Learn from it, and then use that as teaching for if you have kids, for your kids. So that they can understand, I know my kids absolutely love it when I come home with something. I've made them process animals before for me as well, or with me. And every time we, grill something up or cook something from those animals, we revisit those stories. How did this happen, and what weapon was used, and the distances, and how I trained for that, and if they were there with me or not. All of those things are important. But again, if you have a spouse that does not like hunting season, or when you are gone, or when you are working on your brand or whatever, ask yourself why. And I could almost guarantee, I'd almost put money on it, it's because you come back worse than when you left. And they don't like that. And that's generally more of a trigger for them than it is a celebration. My wife always laughs. She's like, well, I'll make your pocketbook hurt or your wallet hurt while you're gone. I'm like, if that's what it takes, because she's the saver, I'm the spender. I'm like, if that's what it takes for you to go get the clothes that you've been telling me you wanted for the last year, go for it. I don't care. I'll go hunt. You can go shop, like, but like, again, building that relationship, being consistent. And then of course, being a better version of yourself, whatever your hobby is, even if you're not, I imagine you're a hunter if you're listening to this podcast, but even if you're not huge into hunting, you're more of an outdoorsman, whatever, you need to get away for a couple of days to recharge. Make sure you come back a better version of yourself for your family, for your spouse, for your kids, for both. Just for that reason.
Yeah, that's really good advice, man. And being intentional about that takes some pre-planning, like you said, on the drive home, that kind of thing. Like, how am I gonna pour into my kids and my wife when I'm back? And that will yield more trips in the future, right? Where everybody in the ecosystem is happy with the outcomes.
And prepping it too on the front end, right? Like knowing okay, I'm going to be gone for a 10-day hunt, taking that time early to pour in, to build up the baseline of what is in that account before you go withdraw 10 days. Yeah. I mean, my wife, she'll get to the point, she'll be like, do you need to go get some space, because I come back, that's my solitude, right? Like all the nonsense, all the noise, when I can go, even if we're back home and I go sit in a tree stand for a few hours and I don't bring my phone, I don't care about filming, like whatever, not doing content today. It should make me a better husband, a better father, if I'm being mindful and intentional about that time, right? And I'm not going to say it always does, but usually that's the reset. Now I can go pour even more into it, to where I'm not just, if I worked a 9 to 5, would I have more physical time than I do right now? Sure. But the quality of the time, because with what I've just done for the last 11 years, like, it drains you, it drains me, it drains my soul. Like I don't have that same deal. And even since I started this company, that was my outlet that kind of recharged the batteries, like what you were talking about earlier, Johnathan. It's like, that makes me better at all these things. And that's why I do it. And we got to stay mindful about it, because especially as you get more involved, like I was saying before, like you get wrapped up in it. You get wrapped up in the content, you get wrapped up in the partnerships and the gear and all this stuff. And it's like, we got to remember and be grounded in like why we wanted to get into this in the first place. And it was really so we could do it more, have our children involved, at least from my perspective. And I'm gathering from yours as well. And surround ourselves with cool people, not to go chase product, chase dollars, chase once in a lifetime hunts all the time. Right. Like it's to be able to do this and be mindful of it and live our lives through our passions.
Yep. Exactly.
Johnathan, we were talking about core values earlier, and I think it might be safe to assume here that one of yours would be your fitness, for a number of different reasons, man. But could you talk us through a little bit about kind of your relationship with your fitness and maybe your fitness journey, especially with joining on with First Form?
Yeah, no, for sure. So, and this is kind of so right now I'm not at my best. I'll nip that in the bud right now. I would say my peak was probably a couple years ago, and I'm looking to get back there now. I've got a picture of myself, that I'm looking at actually right now up on my vision board, where I need to be, because I felt like I could go run a 5K if I needed to. I could go pack out an elk if I needed to. And I never got tired with my kids or anything like that, which my biggest problem is nutrition, is not just letting things slide. I can pack on muscle and fat real easy, and it doesn't come off as easy. And
Same.
Yep.
yeah,
Same.
exactly. I've kind of justified, like, and it is a justification, where I'll tell people, like, look, I'm not gonna be your fastest dude, but I'll get there. I have tree trunks for legs. Like, I've come up with a bunch of stuff, but in all reality, I'm on my own fitness journey as well, and being involved with First Form helps raise that standard in a way that is so different, because again, they are those friends that will call you out on, like, if you keep saying, well, here's my goal, but you never really accomplish it, they're going to be like, hey, what's the deal? Like, are you really trying to get there or not? And you're also surrounded by people that go out and do things like 100 milers and 24-hour runs and things that I have no desire to do, but it allows me to see, like, that is possible for humans to go and do that. And what is my goal? What is my 100-mile race? And a big deal for me is just being fit in the mountains, not being a liability and not being limited because of my fitness. And so, that's just something that I'm currently working on. I go to the gym every single day, and if I'm not in the gym, I'm generally out rucking or I'm on the mountain somewhere. And so for me, that's the easy part. For some people, that's the hard part. The hard part for me is just making sure I keep track of my food. And so with First Form, we have an app that actually makes it real easy. You even get a coach to go with it. And so just taking advantage of that, tracking my food, not to become obsessive over it, but to understand what's generally coming in versus the output. That's key. And so, again, in my own fitness journey right now, that's where I'm at, is just trying to shed some fat, to get back down to where I feel lean and aggressive and ready to go. And also portraying, basically those values of your body's a temple. If you're Christian, you understand that, or even just appreciative of the fact that you have a working body. I have lots of friends that are missing appendages, or multiple, or can't walk, or are paralyzed, or whatever, and not taking for granted the health that I have, all 4 limbs, all 10 fingers and toes. My eyes work relatively well, and so all of that, not taking it for granted so that I can be the best version of myself, for me, for the people that rely on me up in the mountains, and also for my family. It's a big deal.
Yeah, that resonates with me, man. Very, very similar. Our parallels just continue because, like, I'm the exact same way, right? I can watch Carter eat and gain weight, but then I hold muscle really well. And I'm talking about the rationalization thing, right? I've done that for a long time, where it's like, well, I'm stronger than everybody, and I'm not actually, but
Mm-hmm.
I'm fairly strong and I can maintain it. And if I have weight on my back, I'll go forever. I might not be the fastest, but, like, I'm stubborn. I grew up in the army as a light
Mm-hmm.
infantryman. Like, I know I can just go. And so, like, I
Mm-hmm.
won't be the limiting factor. So the mental gymnastics and the rationalizations. And then it's like, dude, you own a fitness company. You're sitting at, 10, 15 pounds heavier than you should be. Like, what are you doing? And then you got guys around
Mm-hmm.
you that are like, hey, fatty, hey, fatty. And it's like, all right, I got it. So no, very, very similar stuff, man. And I love it because it, you've got to hold yourself accountable for whatever reason, even just to, like, as a father, what's the example that you're setting for your children, right? Are my children going to grow up seeing me in the gym, working out with me, even if they're just playing in my garage while I'm lifting, while, my wife and I are doing this, to where they can grow up with that foundation, because I didn't have that as a kid. And, like, I wish I did. And, like, that's not an excuse because I fucking control it. But it's like, what do I want to build and the tools do I want to give them so they don't have to struggle with that later?
Mm-hmm.
And, that's a big thing that I'm always thinking about, is like, I need to be Superman to my kids, right? I'm only 5'7". I'm not changing that. I'm still going to be short, but I don't have to be short and fat, And so,
Mm-hmm.
like,
Mm-hmm.
how do I move forward there? So no, man, I love that. I, I love this conversation, man. This was good. I honestly didn't know what we were going to talk about. We went into this one kind of cold, but I love the
Yeah.
direction it went. And I think it's a really important conversation across the board about, building the relationship with your spouse, having the plan to chase your dreams and your passions and all that, and then just focusing on getting, better every day. It's that simple. And surrounding yourself with those people that'll push you.
Oh yeah, 100%. And also for the parents out there that maybe you're big into hunting and you're concerned that your kids may not be, again, what example are you setting to make them want to get into that? I'm just reminded of that because big reason I didn't apply for any out of state hunts this year was because my son, who's 17, so this is last year as a youth. It took years of him going and glassing with me and things like that, getting up in the mountains, going through his own phases as you do as a teenager. In the youth group, they had to choose between multiple different options of long-term, not events, but long-term activities that they would do for, I think it was a month or 2 months, whatever, each time that they had their activity time every week. And without telling me, he went to get his hunter safety course done. And so obviously the leaders were in charge of that, but he chose that activity. And he didn't tell me until he came home with the card that came in the mail, and he just handed it to me. And I was like, "Well, what's this?" And I looked at it. I was like, "When'd you do your hunter safety course?" And he was like, "Oh, that's," and he explained it to me. I was like, "Well, that's awesome." I said, "Do you want me to put you in for the hunts this year?" He was like, "Of course." And that to me was just like, I never wanted to force my kids into hunting, and I still don't, but I take them with me. I offer for them to go with me. I take them out shooting their bows. We go over gun safety, all of those things, and why we hunt. We eat the meat, all of that stuff, and for it to culminate in that, I almost came to tears, and it was an awesome experience. And so, having him put in for the hunts, I didn't want to put it in for any out of state hunts, and then have to give up that money and points because I would choose Brody if the seasons overlapped. And so, he's got he drew a buck tag. He's going to be doing elk as well here in Utah, which we're lucky to have over the counter. And we're going to enjoy his last youth season. So hopefully if everything goes well, at least out of Utah, we'll be pulling a couple of animals off the mountain. So I'm really excited about that, but just set the example, guys. Make sure that you are coming back a better version of yourself, and you're not making it a bad experience for your kids if you do take them. Don't force something on them because they'll just shun you for that, and it'll end up being a worse situation than them choosing not to hunt right now. So
I love that, man. I hope my little one's following the same footsteps. That seems like an awesome surprise. But
yeah,
Johnathan, where can listeners find you and what you got going on social media?
yeah, of course. So on Instagram, it's RedBeard Outdoors. It should pop up if you type that in, but it's specifically red.beard.outdoors. On Instagram, on YouTube, it's RedBeard Outdoors. Same logo on everything. And then on podcasts, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, you can find me there. And I do, like, this whole year of 2024, I'm doing giveaways, one a month. The one in June will probably have passed by the time this comes out. If not, go check that out. It's an archery giveaway, basically everything except for a bow. So you go buy the bow, I'll get you set up with everything else that I use. And then in July, if that hasn't been announced yet, go make sure that you're signed up for the subscription, alert, all that stuff on YouTube, so you can get that. That one's going to be huge. Super stoked about that. So that's where you can find me.
Awesome, dude. Luke, you got any closing thoughts?
No, man, Johnathan, I appreciate the time, man. This was a great conversation. Looking forward to hopefully catching back up with you. I know we crossed paths several times, but we need to get a workout in and maybe even get on the mountain one of these days.
Oh yeah, definitely. I agree.
Awesome. Thanks again, Johnathan. Appreciate your time, man. And listeners, as always, appreciate the hell out of you guys. We'll talk to you next week.